welcome everyone. The meeting is being recorded in case you missed it, so that we can have it for viewing pleasures later for those who couldn't attend. But we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the financial literacy session from the SEAHO Professional Development Committee. My name is Liz Ingrayo, and I serve as the chair of select for the Professional Development Committee. And I will have my counterpart introduce herself in a minute, and then we'll introduce our wonderful panelists and then get started.
Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Wells, and I am the chair for the SEAHO Professional Development. So thank you all for taking your time during this busy time to, attend this webinar.
Thanks, Christian. So I have the pleasure of moderating this panel. Just some housekeeping items. We have a couple of questions that we are going to ask our panelists to answer. And then after that, we're going to leave some time for you all in the audience to ask any questions that you have. If a burning question comes up while they're sharing their stories, feel free to put it in the chat, and we can ask those questions at the time or save them for the end to ask at the end of the presentation. So I'll start introducing first Jeannie Hopper. Jeannie serves as the Director of Residential Education at Louisiana State University. She has been a professional in higher education for 19 years, and fun fact, she is the former SEAHO president. Thank you, Jeannie, for joining us. And then secondly, we have Bob Boyle, who serves as our Senior Director for Housing and Residential Life at the University of North Florida. He has been a professional in higher education for 26 years. He served in Florida for 23 and in Oahu for 3. He has also served as the former SEAHO Committee Chair for Corporate Partners in 2018 and as SEAHO Conference Coordinator in 2022. He is also the winner of the Charles W. Bean Memorial Service Award in 2023. And he received his bachelor's in education and master's in science in education at Jacksonville State University. Welcome, Bob. All right, so we are going to be talking about financial literacy. For those who are here, we're going to hopefully cover 2 different experiences. One about kind of managing budgets from a housing perspective and a housing professional perspective, and then also some personal financial literacy. And so Bob and Jeannie are going to talk a little bit about their journeys navigating what it means to be a housing professional and your finances personally. Then hopefully shed some light on what a housing budget is composed of, what it looks like, and how what you kind of need to know to navigate those spaces. So first for you all, can you briefly discuss how you were able to navigate your finances while being a housing professional?
Bob, you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
Okay. Y'all, I've warned Bob before we started. I'm gonna ramble, so just bear with me. I'm a storyteller. I have no linear path in my life. Okay. But I've been a lifetime housing professional. I've never worked really in any other job other than like babysitting. Like I was an RA and I've been in housing ever since. So like many of you, I have never truly been paid a lot of money, because when you work in higher education, it is not a secret that our salaries are not hugely competitive when you compare us to the rest of the world. And so I never was able to truly develop a lot of savings. I paid for college on my own. Wonderful parents, but they just didn't have the money for that. And so I had massive student loans from day one of stepping foot on my college campus. I also got married right out of graduate school and started having children while I was young and still living in. So I was supporting a family of 4 very early on a live-in professional salary. So just think about that for a moment, about how we just had tons of extra money just coming out of everywhere. Not at all. So basically, most of my life, I have lived paycheck to paycheck. And I love my job. We don't get paid a whole lot. My husband was a freelance writer for most of our marriage. He's now a professor. Yay. But for a long time now, he was writing freelance, which is not the most lucrative thing in the world, though he was great at it. And then factor in, I got a cancer diagnosis out of the blue about 7 years ago, and that anything we had gathered up to that point just got wiped out once again. So every time you feel like you make a step forward, something happens and you're just like, ugh. And it can be exhausting. It can be disheartening. But I do think that I've learned a lot from it, and no matter what, we always had enough. And that has been my mantra my entire life, with my children, with my husband, with everything that I do, is that we have enough. We are okay. I've learned how to budget. I've learned how to make a lot with a little, and make things work. And I think the biggest thing that I've been able to do over the years is pay my damn bills. Forgive me for the language, but I have never not paid my bills. Like, that has always been a priority. It's the health of my family and it's paying my bills, because I owe that money and I have got to pay it. And so, we learn to cut back in certain areas. My children have never been to Disney World. Guess what? They're okay. We don't have designer shoes. We don't have the nicest stuff. Who cares? Like, we're fine. Whenever other people were talking about when our children were small and they would talk about these big vacations, my daughter wanted to meet, Anna and Elsa too. And I was like, great. I found out that the library was doing a free event with the princesses, and I got my butt there. And my daughter has pictures with Anna and Elsa, just like every kid who flew all the way to Disney World. So, you know what I mean? Like, there are things that you can do, and a 3-year-old does not know the difference. She was delighted. So there's a lot of ways that you can do things. We never did the big vacations. Camping is like $30 a night. Go camping, friends. Kids love it. We do camping and hiking all the time. Little things make a difference. We always leased our car. I never had money for a down payment. But guess what? When you lease a car, you get a brand new car every 3 years. They just give it to you. It's amazing. And no, I didn't own it, but literally I drive like a 2023 car right now, and I never had to pay a down payment. Look into it, friends. Leasing is amazing. I've also always rented a house. We've rented everywhere we've lived as soon as we moved off. And it was only until just recently that, in fact, 2 weeks ago, I bought my first home. At age 43, I finally had the money to buy my own home. And, I can get into that later, but I think it's the things that we learned through our journey of learning how to cut corners, learning how to make do with what we have, being happy with what we had, and not always looking at what everyone else had and comparing ourselves, that helped us to realize that we're living perfectly fine. We don't need all those other things. And whenever we got to this point where we finally were able to get a home, we had zero debt, zero. I paid off, I'm not even gonna tell you how much in student loans, a lot between my husband and myself combined. We paid off every credit card, we paid off all my cancer medical bills, we paid off everything. And so that when we went into it and we're ready to buy a home, our credit scores, both of us, my husband and I both, were over 800, because we had never missed a payment. We had never messed up. We had always done the things. And so I just think that there's a lot that you can do with a little, and never think that, oh my gosh, I'm a new professional, or I'm a mid-level professional, I'm not where I want to be because I look at other people. Chart your course, focus on what you need to do with what you have, and do the best that you can with it. And it's going to work out. Now that I'm finally in a place where we both have a solid income, we immediately got a financial advisor, because I was that person who, multiple times, and this is embarrassing to admit, but I feel like this is a safe space. Multiple times I would open a savings account and it would get shut down by the bank for insufficient funds, because they take out that fee. And eventually that little $2.50 fee every month ate away at our tiny little savings until it was gone. And that's embarrassing to admit, but for a very long time, I had no savings account at all. I mean, I can't even talk about investments or anything like that, because I had none. I couldn't even save $1. So, but now I'm in a place where I have a financial advisor who can help us, because I didn't know what to do the minute I started getting a real paycheck. But again, we had no debt. We were spending our money responsibly, not trying to live outside of our means. And eventually we've gotten to a great place. So yeah, I will stop rambling now.
Thanks, Jeannie.
That's a tough one to follow. I don't know. I'll kind of share, and I love Jeannie's story, and she shared some of it earlier or last week, and it's great. And so congratulations on the house. I'm owning my second home at this point, and I'm 50 years old at this point. You certainly get paid a little bit better as you rise through the ranks, so I won't complain there on my end personally, but it is exactly true over time, especially in these entry level, mid-level jobs. You want to find ways to get paid what you're worth and things like that. Obviously, I know I was gonna say, I'll also share, probably overshare. My world personally, I'm divorced at this point. I'm a father of two older teens, including a first-year student, which has been fun, living on campus with us here at UNF. So that's awesome. I recommend that. But now I think I'm kind of now trying to find a way, how can I get back to campus and live on again? I lived on till I was about, my first couple of jobs as a res life coordinator, area coordinator, before taking my first mid-level job, which just happened to be here at UNF, which is weird. And so I think if I did anything right early on as a entry-level housing res life professional, student affairs professional, it was, especially in these scenarios where some of us live on for a time, I took advice from a mentor at that time, is just whatever you can do to pay yourself rent every month and kind of sock it away, save it as much as you can. I can't say me and at that time my significant other were great at that every paycheck, but we certainly took a shot, and it was easier before we had started having children or got our first dog, stuff like that. But I think we did okay, and it certainly helped us set us up to be in a better situation when we decided to move off campus and search out a new opportunity living off campus, to have a little bit of something to put a down payment with or help with the furniture. And I would say all of us get a lot of professional advice or advice from talking heads or family. I think you definitely, as Jeannie said, you really got to figure out what you can live with and what you can't live without, or and there's certainly, everybody has wants. I certainly have that now, and trying to invest in yourself a little bit or your family. It's certainly, having a family changes things some. Yeah, I mean, it helps you to focus, or as Jeannie had her personal experience medically, and it's things like that. My perspective is just tend to focus you some. And so I think the best thing I ever did along the way was just kind of pay myself rent when I had the opportunity to do it. Learning what we can all learn, and if you can avoid revolving credit debt, do it. I was lucky enough to go to school, higher ed. My higher ed education was during a different time from a student loan perspective, and always felt I had some flexibility there. And I had creditors even at that time. I was like, oh, that's good debt. Keep that debt and make your payments, do the things, and having, try to pay the interest off early. It puts you in a different scenario as you're coming to the end of that debt. And so, and obviously there's a lot of talk out in the political sector about student loan debt, and that kind of up and down. And some folks are like, oh, please let it come through. And I totally agree with that. And I think some of us working in higher ed can seek out either it's state or federal programs associated with some forgiveness based on what our jobs are, serving the public, serving the education sector. So it's worth looking into those a little more if you hadn't had that opportunity. So, and I would say my other thing is just having a department budget responsibility at this point has helped me in my personal life as I become single in the past 4+ years. And it's just me, and trying to figure out, I should have been more intentional way back when I was married, but I don't know. We won't go into that right now. So.
Okay, so thank you, Bob. You both have kind of started alluding to this, but what advice would you give regarding staff who are considering moving off campus? Like, what are the things that you wish people told you about how to prepare yourself for moving off campus?
Yeah, I love this question because I remember vividly when this happened with us, and I was very surprised by some things. First of all, figure out and know what your salary needs are before you accept a new job. And that's going to be different for everybody. When I moved off, I already had a husband and a baby. And I knew that I had to make enough to support them. Research the cost of living for wherever you're going to be, because if you're moving to a different state or a different part of the country, that can be very different from where you currently are. Research how much utilities cost every month and how much they cost just to turn them on. Nobody told me that. So when I moved off for the first time, I was like, oh, there's a fee to even turn on my electricity. I have to give you $400 just for you to press the button. And they were like, yes. And I was like, okay. Didn't expect that. Figuring out what you can afford in your rent or your mortgage or whatever you end up doing, and even your commute. If you're somewhere where you're going to have to be commuting, do you have that vehicle? Do you have gas money? Do you have whatever it is that you need to do to get to and from? All of that adds up. And so when you're thinking about that salary in your head, you might be like, oh, this is $15,000 more than I make now. $15,000 annually, y'all, that's not even gonna cover your rent or your more. I mean, that's, yeah. So really crunch those numbers and make sure that you're not ultimately taking a pay cut by moving off campus. Or if you are, if that's where you are in your life and you're like, I'm okay with that because I need the separation for my mental health or whatever I need to get off campus, that's awesome. And just know what you're walking into. So don't be surprised by it. Also try to negotiate moving expenses if you can. Not every university does it, but the worst they can do is say no. It's a completely normal thing to ask when you get a job. It always shocks me when people don't ask it. So I'll be the nice one and be like, and we offer. I'm gonna offer it to anybody, even if they ask or not. But not every place does that. So please ask. Even if you don't think you have a lot to move, it's still free money. Like, don't turn it down, take it. And then don't buy all the things at once. Sometimes when we get a new job, we move off campus, we're all excited. We're like, I'm going to buy a new car. I'm going to do this. And just maybe pick one thing to treat yourself and be like, I got this great new job, and you should celebrate that. And you should do something nice, but don't do too many nice things. Don't immediately out of the gate put yourself into a bunch of debt because you're embarking on a new lifestyle by living off campus and having to pay those bills. And you don't want to set yourself up for failure on accident. Just make smart choices.
Yeah, the other things I'd add is, and Jeannie hit all the big highlights, and I think that it's crucial to understand how that is. The thing that surprised me, and it shouldn't really surprise us as housing and res life professionals, but it's like the first time I'm in my, new home, however many months, and the AC goes out, you have to navigate that, and you can't, and it's like, I learned rather quickly, even in a younger home, and the home we happened to move into and purchase a first time out of the gate as, I don't know, 30-something year old, or young 30-something year old with a little kid and a dog and all those great things we all love, was, that AC goes out. Now I need to figure out how to get it fixed. And I was able to navigate that part, but like what it takes sometimes, and then learning, it was a good lesson to learn at that time. It's like, I'm going to have a home warranty. When you purchase that first home, make sure that typically there's a home warranty involved, or you can get one, and they're inexpensive. And even as you're living in a home right now, that's the one thing I've done over time is, home warranty, and it covers appliances. It covers all these things that, yeah, I'm still going to have to pay to get some things fixed. It gives you a one-stop shop at different times. The ceiling fan goes out, or I use the heck out of it. I'll say that over time. And it's just one of those things and as a home gets older, you're going to have to replace some things. It's not just about the couch and the TV and things like that. It's going to be the roof and understanding the details of getting homeowners insurance for the first time. And I think the other, way back living on, one of the things, in addition to try and pay myself a little rent every month, was also having renter's insurance. It low cost, it covers you when something goes bad, and it's, you're low cost. I can't get over how it even is still now low cost. And especially, a lot of us were working and living in institutions, and I think departments want to step in and help. I would want to step in and help our people. But there's a limit to what we institutionally can cover for your personal belongings while you're living on campus. And so, yeah, if we're neglectful as the landlords, the building owners, that's different. But if that student living above you or students living above you set off that sprinkler and water's coming down, I'm naturally going to, I think me and my senior staff, including a couple folks on here, we're going to do things to take care of our people the best we can. But can I stroke you a check for $500, $1,000 just at a drop of a hat? You cannot. Which is another part about being a fiscally responsible leader in the field. So I think that would be the one thing but Jeannie's right, especially on our end, as you explore that next job, and, is it moving expenses? Do they give me a mobile device or mobile devices? Do they cover my cell phone coverage? Things like that. If you can squeeze those things, do it.
All right, so we are going to transition to department budgets. So can you all talk a little bit about what your experience has been with managing a department budget throughout your career and maybe some lessons learned?
I would be delighted to, Liz. Thank you. And again, y'all, this is gonna be a safe space. I'm gonna share with y'all something terrible that I did once. Okay. But I'm gonna start with when I was an RA. I think this is important, even though it was a very long time ago. If some of you here directly supervise RAs, I strongly encourage you to do this. As a 19-year-old first-year RA, my hall director broke down our programming budget for the building by individual RA. And so I knew what my money, like what I was allowed to spend for my floor. And I knew what it was for both the Aramark budget, so the on-campus money, and for money, like to go to Walmart or whatever. And so I had two little budgets. I think they were like $2 per resident. I mean, it was a very small amount of money, but it was the first time that I ever had to manage a professional budget. And as a 19-year-old, that felt like such an important thing to do, that I had to keep up with that. And I had to learn, and y'all, this was like the year 2000, like with all the zeros. So like Excel spreadsheets weren't like a thing. It was like on paper where we were figuring, tracking our budget. But it was a really wonderful lesson that I learned then, very early on as a student staff member, how to take a small amount of money and make it last for the entirety of an academic year. How to track it, how to reconcile it, and spread it out. So that's what true budgeting is, right? It's being able to say, I'm going to spend this here, this here, this here, and at the end it will all even out. Then as a graduate student, I, took on like the hall council budget, which at the time, our students would pay into it. So they would give us money at move-in, and then we would manage a bank account. And that's how the hall budget worked at that time. I think it might still be that way in some schools, but it was fascinating. And I also was in charge of all the living learning communities on campus. And so I managed a big budget for that. And that was part of their fee bill. And so that money went to the main housing office. And then I had to request money from them to do our events. And this is where I have a cautionary tale for you, friends, because I committed larceny as a first-year graduate student. That is a real word, because when it happened, I had to look it up because I had never even heard of larceny, did not know what it meant, but I'm guilty of it. Basically, I was in charge of all the living learning communities on campus, and for move-in, they all got t-shirts. The LLC t-shirts, they were all different colors, blah, blah, blah. And so I had to go to the t-shirt company, order said t-shirts, turn in all the sizes, did everything right, and they needed payment to process the order. And I was like, oh, I don't have payment right now. I have to get it from the university. And they're like, well, we can't start working on them without it. We need a check right now. And so I was like, okay. So I wrote a personal check that I knew I did not have the money in my bank account for. Look at y'all making faces. Be nice to me. I wrote the check because I did not own a credit card, didn't have a credit card, had no other way to pay it. I did not have a departmental card. I was never issued a departmental card in this role. So the university was gonna cut me a check and then I was gonna pay the teacher company. That was how it was formally set up. But I couldn't wait for that. I needed them to start making it. So I went ahead and wrote the check and I said, will you not cash it and just wait until the money comes through? And she was like, of course. Yeah, so she did not do that. She went ahead and submitted it that day. And I kid you not, this is not a joke. I got a call from my dad, who was, 8 hours away in Memphis, Tennessee. And he said, the police are here looking for you. And I said, I'm sorry, what? And he was like, did you commit larceny? And I was like, no, I don't know what that is. And it is basically writing a check when you know you do not have the funds to cover it. And so, long story short, I did not actually get charged. I'm fine. I have a clear police record. But they laughed at me and then yelled at me and said, like, don't be an idiot. And I said, yes, sir. And I went back to the university that I was working at and I was like, hi, I did this. I need this to be fixed right now. And the entire process changed and I was able to then request advance funds, blah, blah, blah. But I am the reason that at a large institution in SEAHO, you were able to do advance funds early on in the 2000s because that was bad. So anyway, never ever put your own money on the line for something for work. Don't do it. It doesn't matter. I could have called any number of people and fixed that situation in a much more intelligent way than I did in that moment. But as a first-year graduate student, I didn't want to mess up. I felt like it was going to be okay, and it was a terrible call. So know the process, know what you're supposed to do, know who to call if you're not sure. And again, never stake your own personal finances for work. Don't do it. I feel like even today, sometimes that happens, in particular with travel. And you might be asked to front a flight or your meals or whatever when you're traveling for work. If you cannot afford that, tell somebody that you can't, and they should be able to give you in advance. And I know that every institution is different. Now I have an actual departmental card that I'm able to put stuff on, but that is not the case everywhere. And so be transparent with what situation you're in whenever you're out there. Anyway, long story short, I became a professional. I've learned a lot over the years about how to manage different types of monies. I've learned a lot about the difference between salaries and wages and fringe benefits and programming funds and just a lot of different things. Money comes from a lot of different sources for us. And it's important to know what you can spend with some money that you can't spend with other money. Maybe I can buy a prize with this, but I can't with this. And so it's really important to understand the nuances of what you're doing. And so as a professional, I started to learn more and more about that and spend time sitting down with our budget manager and really truly understanding where's the money coming from so that I know as I'm spending it or as my staff is spending it, that I'm doing it responsibly. I will say just really fast, I had two things that I was taught by our budget manager at Ole Miss. I used to work at Ole Miss. And at the University of Mississippi, Tracy Vaughn is the budget manager there. She is an amazing woman. And she taught me two things. The first one is that when you're making your budget, always look at a 2 to 3 year trend. So never do a snap budget decision based off of 1 year. That can be a blip. And so don't cut something major or don't add something major just based off of 1 year. Always have at least a 2 to 3 year trend before you do something big. The other thing she taught me is to always build in a pillow. So we talk about having a cushion, right, in your budget. I think in most businesses or whatever, they'll talk about having a mattress. And if you work in a state institution like I always have, there are a lot of eyes on your budget. And so creating an entire mattress of cushion is not always possible. But you can have a pillow. And that's how she always described it. It's not as much, but it's still a cushion. So if something happens, you have somewhere soft to land or something where you can pull it out and you have that little safety net, basically. And so if I'm looking at my budget right now, we just recently did our budget for the year. If I'm saying we're going to do 5 large campus events, well, guess what? I'm actually going to put on my form that we're going to do 6 large campus events. I'm going to budget for 6, even though I know we're actually doing 5. When I'm scheduling for our resource room, I only need 20 hours a week of work in the resource room, but I budget for 40. Nobody knows that I don't actually staff the resource room for 40 hours. And sometimes like during training, I do. But whenever something happens later and we end up, they increase the cost of the meal plans without telling us, or something like that happens, and I need to pull money, I'm not going to panic because I had that pillow that I intentionally built in, knowing that I can pull it from that fake event that's not really happening, or from those hours in the resource room that don't really exist. And it's not going to hurt my bottom line at all, but it's going to help me to have that little padding in there that isn't an unethical padding. It's not like I'm adding, $1 million to the budget, and it's all for logical things, but it's just that little cushion, not a full mattress, but a pillow. And that's the way that I was taught to do it. And it's been very helpful for me throughout my career. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
I can't follow larceny. This is not, anyway, okay, yeah. I love the piece about the pillow and having cushion. Now, now being in charge of a departmental budget of several $1 million coming in and going out. And so for those of you that aspire to these SHO roles and things like that, you want to understand that your staff is also thinking, I'm going to have a pillow over here because it was great. It is a great idea. It is smart. It is something I do as being responsible for our department's budget. Ultimately, I have people clearly helping me with it, but it's also understanding what are the realities of the expenses that are going to come your way and figuring out. I was early on, as I was in mid-level roles and having those opportunities, or really entry level, doing whether it was my staff's RA budget, the biggest area that I learned from was advising RHA and understanding how that organization was funded. And sometimes you got a couple different pots of money. And I love that it was, obviously the majority of it was going back to student engagement and student activity side of things, which was awesome. But it really also gave me an opportunity the first times I had to figure out travel, I had a separate travel budget for that small group of RHA exec officers that we could do some things at that time. And it was a little bit of a different world, I would say, but juggling different pots of money and doing what's appropriate. And then sometimes when you're dealing with a student organization type thing, depending on what institution, how they approach those, whether it's funded by the institution or funded by a department or funded by some other outside source, those are very valuable opportunities. So I think and you hear a lot of different things about, I don't want to advise and things like that. I was in my second entry level job, kind of that transitional job before the mid managers, getting the opportunity to do that, which was beyond what I was doing in supervising RAs and grads and working with a building budget or community budget. But I learned, you're not talking about a ton of money in any of those scenarios often. I mean, some, but the lessons I learned then that helped influence and really propelled me personally as I was seeking out mid-level jobs. What's my level of spending authority or purchasing authority? And is there an intersection with and it wasn't something I was really thinking about as I was more on the res life side, but like procurement and in my first mid-manager job, just then a lot of procurement engagement and understanding. We gotta do this little physical project, and how do you appropriately spend it? Or is it big enough project you have to bid it out? And those are the other things I would say. If any of you have an opportunity, whether in your department, to be part of a procurement process or a bid process, those are great opportunities to see some behind the scenes, how some of it's sometimes ugly, how the how it's all pulled off, whether it's your laundry contract or your dining contract or whoever's providing light bulbs and air filters and things like that. And so seeking out opportunities and beyond just obviously sitting down with some of us who are exposed or touch or watch the big money early on is valuable. Did I answer the question? I don't, sorry, Liz. I was still caught on larceny. Come on. Gene,
Yes, you did answer the question.
I don't have a larceny story.
So something that
Don't
I
want
was
one, Bob.
No, you don't want one. Not
ahead,
now.
Ju-
I definitely don't want it now.
Go ahead, Julie.
something that I was taught early on is utilize your resources, right? Because very early on in my career, when I was a sophomore in college, I obviously had advisors, but I oversaw 3 different budgets within Res Life. And I was also involved in that role in going to CSL, and I worked for admissions. And so we also had a linen contract. And so something that I was taught, right, is we're gonna get this money, we have our money, but so much of it is going to come from this external contract. So many of it is going to come from this external department and then those above us. So how are we managing it and not giving it out, but also advocating at the same time and making sure that everyone knows who's advocating for what money and what those limitations of the different positions are. Because something that I've done is I've not been sturdy enough with students, you know, in my current practice where they're going and they're utilizing when I know it's not right, but I haven't been able to give my full time to that. Or I haven't been able to, you know, learning new skills, right? I don't have at my role anymore, right? As a student where you're able to do all things, I'm not able to just go to different departments, different organizations, meetings and be like, hey, I think the way your policies are and the way my departments, they don't match. But I don't have that anymore, right? And so what I do as the oversight is making sure, you know, I stay 3 tracks ahead of that. Because that way, you know, budgets are going to change. They are. Look at politics. It's going to happen. So you need to be able to think ahead in that manner so that that doesn't happen. But when you're in it, you forget that, or you run out of time, or you do whatever you do. And so remembering that foundational piece of how can I utilize my partners? How can I utilize my other departments and that skill set, right? Of you don't know, you're not going to be in this role forever. You could go away tomorrow. How are you going to then be able to track that so that someone knows where that money is?
Thanks, Julie.
Yeah,
Um,
thanks, Julie.
And then I think just so we have time for questions, I'm gonna skip to a different question and just kind of end with, how would you all help others navigate when your department budget has been cut? And how you navigate that in your current roles?
Yeah, I'm like Bob is mentioning, he's the SHO, and so he's dealing with a whole huge budget for the department. I have just the Res Life side of our budget, or the Res Ed budget for my institution, so it's a little bit different. I'm on a much smaller scale than he is. But in general, whenever we have to cut money, immediately my thought goes to what can I do to maintain student services. So the services students I want to keep there, and I want the well-being of the staff to not be affected as much as possible. And so we end up cutting, you know, immediately my pillow goes away, right? All that extra stuff, any fluff, any open positions are not going to get filled. So those salaries you get to hold on to. You know, when you get down that road, I'm going to cut travel or professional development things before I'm going to cut a service to a student. But even though you can't travel, your full salary is still maintained. Do you know what I mean? So it's a balance during COVID. Obviously, we had to do a lot of this stuff and we refunded a bunch of student fees. But it was a little bit easier then because you're doing it in group, and so it wasn't like one institution's travel got cut, like everybody's did. So there was a little bit of safety in numbers there. I think it's a little bit harder whenever you might be standing alone and making big cuts to your staff. And then they're seeing at other institutions that's not happening. But in general, I do my best to maintain student services and to maintain staff. But yeah, you can get really hard sometimes. Yeah. Bob, I'll pass this one to you faster.
Yeah, I think, and it was definitely in my experience, I've been at institutions where we had a tight budget all the time. It was just no way. And then I've been fortunate to be here at UNF, where I think institutionally they've made a lot of smart moves financially. So it sets us up for when there is this tough moment, or it was the tough moment mainly during the pandemic years. And I say years because it wasn't just, there was like breathe all that, and then and even now there's residual things that have hung on institutionally that I've, and financially that we have to navigate. I think, and I don't know, Katie or others on here could tell me, at the time you really want you want to put people at ease, the staff, the pro staff at ease, or at times student staff, that jobs aren't going away. They need us to do this. So if we still have students here, maybe not as many as we normally would, that's okay. We've intentionally have financial and trying to be transparent with as many of the staff at the pro level and really even the hourly employees, students and full-time people or part-time people, just that we're okay financially, we're good, and trying to because you don't want people sweating their job's going to go away. And so that was a big thing for me in those moments. I think the other thing I've tried to do is impress upon our staff when things are great. And a lot of the times financially things are great for us because occupancy is high. There's demand for our beds. We're trying to save for the rainy day. Bad things that can happen like a pandemic, but we're also trying to invest in facilities and plan for the future. That measured growth and personnel growth, you want to be smart about that. And also I don't find it hard to spend within our means and do all the things. And that's helped me personally as I've dealt with, my own personal finances to understand there's things we gotta have. There's safety and both upkeep of facilities and the safety of everyone, students and staff in those areas are no-brainers. These are things we have to do. And then it becomes easier to where can we tighten? Where can we cut and not negatively impact the student experience if we can avoid it? But do I need as many widgets on the shelf in case something breaks? Maybe I don't. I can get those widgets fast, especially now with Amazon or whatever it is. And so monitoring what inventory we have physically, so then we're not having to go, okay, Res Life, you can't buy any more colored paper or butcher paper or anything like that. You want to, and in the scheme of things, the colored paper and things, yes, it can be more expensive than regular paper, but it is not as expensive as the thousands and thousands of widgets or whatever we have. I say widgets when it's just a general facilities need little washers and filters and things like that. So it's like, where can we pinch? Where can we cut back? The other thing I was going to mention too is just being mindful as we walk around campus, our staff walks around campus, not to brag about how many people we took to SEAHO or whatever. And just because other units are not funded like us, other units don't have as many reams of paper as we do, literally, and just being mindful of that. And I think that's just something I've tried to impress upon our folks and being good stewards of the resources. It also means don't be too braggy about the spendy.
All right, so we have about 12 minutes left. We did want to give an opportunity for those in the audience to ask any questions that you have. If you're comfortable, you can unmute and speak, or you can pop your question in the chat. Okay, so the question in the chat is, what are some of the unforeseen expenditures you anticipate in the coming years?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that already I've been pulled into a meeting. Our provost is very interested in AI. And we're being asked to come up with ways that we will incorporate AI into our things. And so the conversation has already been had. Do we need to purchase our own? I don't even know enough about it to say the right word, but our own something so that we can control the information that's out there. This is sad. Like they want us to input all of our manuals and everything so that when the RAs are responding to stuff, they can just type into the app like, you know, there's a category 2 hurricane coming, what do I do? And it will just pull it directly out and tell them. So those are things that as we try to stay abreast of things that are coming, I think that we're gonna have to up our technology game. Not just for our regular housing and res life experiences, but also just pressure from the universities that they're trying to keep up. And I know that our campus is very strongly pushing in that direction. So I think technology is a big one for us.
Yeah, I think that's the unforeseen piece is like I've found now that there's no shortage of foreseen things that you have to plan for. And you're talking, I used to be somebody that was like, we only need to worry about, and I'm not necessarily this as a SHO, but was, I need to worry about the next couple of years. I don't have to worry about 5 and 10 and 15. And, I'm living in a world where I've been responsible for a budget for more than a decade. And there were things I worried about back then. And it's like understanding the life of your facility or facilities and all the components that come with it, because UNF institutionally is a young institution of 50, just slightly over 50. The oldest housing community has almost been here 40 years. And just knowing we've done everything we can do to keep this bad boy running, and carpet and paint and furniture is not going to do it anymore. And the roofs are great, yeah, but I'm worried about the siding coming off the building, stuff like that. And it's like the foreseen keeps me awake at night. And so that's one thing. Sorry, not the question to answer, but it's a reality. And it's things that you just don't think about. It's almost like, I have 9 buildings that we're gonna have to replace every exterior emergency stairwell. And it's a Florida thing, don't ask me, but it's like, I'm gonna have to replace some stairwells, and it's like, I wish I would have thought about that 10 years ago. I would have started saving today, because damn. The unforeseen things, and I think we've been through one. The friggin' pandemic alone was not a foreseen thing, and it has certainly changed me professionally as I think about our budget, and it's also changed us institutionally. I worry about the university's credit rating. That is not something because we directly impact it as somebody who has a bond or bonds to pay. We're getting it all done. It's fine. But 1 year where I don't bring in enough revenue to cover those expenses or to cover the debt coverage, and I'll be happy to get into with anybody individual time on things like that. The things I really enjoy digging into these details, and I've learned so much, and I have no financial training any more than anybody else. I'm not an accountant, but when I'm talking to the university controller and the admin and finance people, I at least want to understand some basic things. And it's like there were moments early on in my SHO where like, Bob, what do you think about the debt coverage ratio? How are you going to do this year? And I'm like, let me get back to you. I'm stuck in a res life meeting. And you find a way to educate yourself as you go. The ACUO competencies and your opportunities to get exposure to how some of us do this at this level is, I think, valuable. So when you have those opportunities, realize hitting on some of those things. Mid-Manager Institute, the Senior Housing Officer Institute. If you get those opportunities, and then the other thing I'd say is don't be afraid to reach out to some of us and say, Bob, can I have 30 minutes, an hour? And I'll pull my budget up. We can look at it together. It is sexy.
Can I add in? I totally agree. And as you were talking, I was like, yes, one of the most beneficial things for anybody, whether you're talking about unforeseen expenses, foreseen expenses, or just regular managing your budget, to sit down and ask somebody. The best thing I've ever done was sit down and have one-on-ones with the budget managers at everywhere that I've worked. And they love it. They're delighted to sit down and show you how they do the budget and all their intricate formulas and the cool things that they have going on. And I've learned so much just by sitting there and taking less than an hour, getting to know those people and asking them my silly questions and just, I mean, the joy that radiates when they're like, oh, let me tell you all about this. I didn't realize, I mentioned fringe benefits earlier. I remember asking for a raise for my staff once, and they were like, well, you know, you're asking for, you know, you want to pay your staff $50,000 and your budget here only shows $50,000 per person. And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to pay them. And they were like, yeah, you need to add about 34% in fringe benefits. And I was like, I'm sorry, say what now? I had no idea that really, if I want to pay a staff member $50,000, I'm actually paying them $67,000 because we have to pay for their retirement, their, you know, FICA and the workers' comp and the unemployment tax and all these other things that we don't see, but somebody's got to pay that, and it's us. And so little things that, you know, have made me a better professional and have made me better at advocating for my staff and doing the things I want to do all came from just taking 30 minutes out of my day and sitting down and asking the question and getting to know the budget managers in the departments.
I would just add something really quick too, especially if your department is an auxiliary. When you talk about unforeseen circumstances, enrollment is one of those. Because as a revenue generating department, if enrollment goes down, there you have no beds to fill and there's your budget. And so that's like, I feel like the biggest gamble every year. It's, oh, what's our target? What's their target? Are they meeting it? What percentage of that comes to housing? And I didn't know any of that, but who knew, right? But when you're an auxiliary, the game is very different than when you're not an auxiliary. So I would add to that as well.
And sometimes you have to educate up to leadership in an appropriate way to get them to understand that that's not happening here at UNF. I'm just saying, sometimes you have to do that. And I think the other thing, and you know, Katie and I had a conversation recently about some of this, not related to anything personal, but it's like, I want to pay everybody more. I want to pay what's appropriate. I want to do all the things for every level of staff, but you also then have to realize the fringe benefit factor. I can't do it for everybody.
Yeah.
I can do incrementally over time. I want to hit student staff. I want to hit part-time adult staff, full-time adult staff, benefited lines. And, you know, I love it when the university makes a blanket decision. I love that. Sure, right on. Everybody's getting a bump and here's what it looks like and things like that. That's easy. I love it. Love it. But I mean, and we'll find a way to make it work financially, but it's like internally as you're trying to either fill positions, recruit appropriately educated and experienced staff for key roles, or retain great people and invest in promotions and things like that, you want to do it appropriately. And sometimes you gotta pick some of these battles. I want to shout out to Julie for mentioning the expense of safe rooms and relocations. Thank you. You're speaking my language. But also sometimes you just got to do some of that stuff for sure. The cost of the physical turnaround of space, or the physical, you know, if there's a direct cost, there's a cost to personnel on them, but also a cost to us institutionally or departmentally.
A part of that is also that expense of people change their mind. Everyone's human, right? And so what I pull out of that with that piece of it is my I'm res life and admissions, but my heart and soul is a small liberal arts admission. And we have a lot of people, as well as I've worked at UIUC for 2 years, right? And so we're talking as an institution, we don't have money, right? You know, I might get a raise, but my raise does not look like most of the students who are deciding whether to go here or not. Right. So they might be between 3 institutions. And I've seen many times people enroll, pay for all housing, not show up, like numerous people. How they have money to do that, because I don't have that kind of money, I don't know. But we saw it before COVID, we'll see it after COVID. Right, so you have to think about that, right? A department can make a decision, an institution, a donor, but in the same moment, in 10 minutes, they can turn that around. Why these people who have mass amounts of money feel like they think that way, I don't know, but they do.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I have to run off to another meeting, so I can't stick around. I know Bob is available to stay if people have questions, but I just wanted to say thank you. And the financial world and budgets, whether they're personal or professional, are always a changing thing. And I think sometimes they're also they would be managed very differently in different hands. And I think there's always room for creativity when budgeting, as long as you're being ethical and fair. But my biggest words of wisdom or advice, I guess, is just ask questions when you're not sure, find somebody that you trust, and pay your bills. Whether it's at work or at home, pay your bills. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeannie. All right, so bye, Jeannie. As we wrap up, I believe Christian is going to put a link. Nope, not today. Okay, never mind. Just kidding. So we have these sessions once a month. Look out for if you don't get the SEAHO newsletter, that is where you will find where all of our future sessions are going to be. So if you don't have it, sign up for it. It's a great way to keep abreast of what's happening in SEAHO. Also, shameless plug, we are still looking for people for our professional development committee to help us decide what we're going to be presenting on. So if you have any interest yourself or your colleagues, please reach out to Christian or myself. We're happy to have anybody join our committee. Thank you to Bob and thank you to Jeannie for sharing your wisdom today. It was awesome. And if no one has any other questions, then we will leave you to enjoy the rest of your day.